improve something. People with growth mindset tend to face challenges head on and are not frightened of challenges. So think about how you feel about things while I'm describing this. People with growth mindset tend to not care, that's not the right word, tend to not mind making mistakes. If they make a mistake, they'll realise the mistake and move on from that. And people with growth mindset tend to take on board feedback and don't look at it as a criticism. Okay, so think about yourself. Let's look at the fixed mindset then. So people with fixed mindset, because they believe their mindset is set at their intelligence is set at a certain level, they don't believe that there's any point in putting any effort to get better at something because that's as far as they can go. Go back to the maths example I just gave you, the GCSE maths. People with fixed mindset tend to not want to face challenges. And it's not because they're lazy. They don't want to face challenges quite often because of fear. They don't want to be made to look foolish. They want to look clever. So they don't want to face something new and try something new for fear of failure. Okay. So mistakes, fixed mindset people don't like making mistakes. So they'll work in an environment, in a situation where they're less likely to make mistakes. They'll stay as they are. So whether that's in terms of how a teacher teaches and the style of teaching that they do, quite often teachers will say to me, but Kelly, I get great results, for example, without using technology. So why would I want to bother using technology? Yeah. I would suggest that's based around a fixed mindset because it's around the fear of trying something new and perhaps not being as good as they would like to be at it. Fixed mindset people don't tend to like feedback. Again, I think about myself when I'm an observer. When we used to grade at our college, if I graded a teacher grade 1 and grade 2, they thought I was the best observer in the whole world. Yeah, I knew everything I could possibly know about teaching and learning. But if I graded them a grade 3 or grade 4, they were like, well, what does she know? She doesn't know anything, yeah? So it's about how people latch onto and take feedback. So I want to give you an example now. Group of 12-year-olds in an art class at school, and their art teacher was trying to teach them portrait painting and had worked incredibly hard on this, but was finding that the students weren't progressing. So the teacher asked the head, can I get a portrait artist in, please? And the head said, yeah, fine. So the teacher, the art teacher and the portrait artist worked together with these students for 2 hours every day for 4 days. And I just want to share you the results of this. So on the left-hand side is the picture that a student drew on Monday, a 12-year-old drew on Monday. And then 8 hours later, 8 hours of sessions with that portrait artist, there's the photos, there's the drawings that they could do afterwards. Okay, so I'm hoping on chat you can actually see a difference between that photo. I am not an artist, but I think there's quite a big difference there. Let's give you another one. So there's Monday. My apologies for the picture there on the left-hand side. It's quite bright. But Monday's picture is a flat-faced picture. By the time that person's got to Thursday, they've really developed some of those skills. I think that's quite clear to see. And the final example, which I think is the best example actually, that flat photo on the Monday, moving forward to a really quite impressive photo by the Thursday. So 2 hours, 4 days, portrait artist. Thank you for saying wow. I think that's fairly wow. What we're going to think about, what is this showing? So this is one of my favourite phrases. This is showing purposeful practice. So this is showing 8 hours of purposeful practice. Practice with a purpose. Practice where people are focused on improving. If you look lower down in the slide, I've got another person, if you're interested in reading anything about any of this, Matthew Saeed. He's absolutely fantastic. He was a UK table tennis champion, and he's gone on from that now, and he presents, etc., etc. And he's written that book Bounce, and the book Bounce talks about the myth of talent. And within his book, he talks about purposeful practice. So, for example, we say David Beckham is one of the greatest players ever, yeah? David Beckham would train with his team, would train with Manchester United, and then would spend another 2 hours every day after training practicing free kicks. That's what he was known for, and that's what he wanted to improve. That's an example of purposeful practice. Okay. So think about either working with your partner at home, or think about working with your children. I'd like to think I took my eldest son through his GCSEs and his A levels, applying some of these skills. He went through and did incredibly well, but he went through knowing A, that it was okay to make mistakes, and B that he actually needed to put some effort in, and was happy to get feedback from myself. So we, as you can see by the second heading, we go back to the key ingredients that are used. This art teacher brought somebody in and said, okay, let's help them with challenge, let's help them through their mistakes. And that portrait teacher would have given a hell of a lot of feedback during that period of time. Next thing is a positive approach. This is showing a positive approach to learning. And it's about, what do students need to know, or what do your staff need to know to have that impact, that positive move forward. So, like I said, Matthew Syed, my final example from him, and I think it's a really, really good example, is we always talk about the Williams sisters as being the most talented female tennis players ever. In terms of those key ingredients, I don't know whether you know this, but the parents of the Williams sisters have become qualified tennis coaches at a high level prior to their children even being born, because that is what they wanted for their children. They wanted their children to have that opportunity and that experience of becoming, really talented sports individuals. And there are some pictures of Serena and Venus with tennis rackets in their hands, as soon as they're walking. So it is about talent, but it's also about the key ingredients in this positive approach. So what does this mean for you? You're probably going, bloody hell, she's rattling on a lot. What does this mean for you? And these are some of the takeaways I want you to think about. I want you to think about, how do you behave and interact with your family? How do you work with your students? How do you work, lead, manage, etc., with your work colleagues? And think about how you could behave. How could you use those key ingredients to move your family, etc., forward? I'm going to share another thing that I remember doing with my youngest son. So my youngest son at 7 was invited to the West Ham Football Academy. Really, I would have said a really talented footballer, but I'll rephrase that. Really good little footballer. So we'd have to drive down the M11 every week, and he'd get such an ear bashing from me during that 25 minutes of driving. And it wasn't until I reflected on it that I looked at the language I was using, and it was so fixed mindset, it was quite scary. I would say to him, bearing in mind he was 7, things like, you need to be your best today. If you're not your best today, you're going to get hoofed off of this scheme. You won't be in the academy anymore. And how is that going to make you feel? You need to work hard for me, Joe. So everything fixed mindset. I didn't say, Joe, you need to think about how you played last week, what you did really well. Can you try and do that again? Those tackles were really strong. Can you try and do that again for me? The skills you learned in the session, can you do at least 2 of those skills during the session today? Obviously, 6 weeks later down the line, Joe got dropped from the West Ham Academy. He was devastated, and I was more devastated with the way in which I behaved. So that never ever took place again. But it's about the how can you use these tools that I'm giving you today to think about how you have meaningful interaction with your family, your partner, your student, and your work colleagues. Okay. I've been teaching now, I think it's 27 years, although I can hear you all going, she doesn't look old enough. 27 years, my 27th year this year. And if you haven't already realised, oh my Lord, we have a massive influence on the students that we work with. So I love it. I don't know how you guys feel. I love it when I go around Tesco's and I'm shopping and someone comes running up to me pre-COVID and says, Kelly, do you remember me from 1998 in your blah, blah, blah group? I'm now doing X, Y, and Z. Just makes me so proud, yeah? The other week I was in the queue for the dump, the dump, because we'd all sort of tidied up over coronavirus and sitting in a massive great big queue, and a police car came around the corner and out jumped 2 really young looking police officers, and when I looked at them, they're 2 of my old students, and it's just like, I didn't get out and say hello to them because I was embarrassed, but I was just so proud of them. So if you haven't already realised, we have a massive influence on our students. I want to share a video with you, and I'm just going to reshare my screen. Oh, here we go, sorry. So let's share this screen with you. Okay, this is Ian Wright. For those of you that are not interested in football, Ian Wright played for Arsenal in the 90s, I believe, and he also played for England. A very emotional player who's gone on to be an incredibly successful pundit. I'd like to watch this. You're going to need some tissues at the ready, I think. I'd like to watch this video about how he feels about the first positive teacher that took any interest in him. David, will you let me know that everyone can hear this, yeah?
Yeah, will do.
Thank you.
The first real positive
Yeah, that's fine.
male in my life, and is a teacher called Mr. Pigden, and I thought that this teacher, Mr. Pigden, the words I got from the people was that he died, and I was, you know what I mean, at the time I was like, oh Jesus, gutted, because he was somebody who would sit me down, he would talk to me, when you know, when I had he used to call it the EBGBs, because I would get angry from being like this to full on rage, and he would sit me down and he would talk to me and he explained to me, you know what I mean, how to communicate. I was like a little, like Tarzan or something. So then he took me out of the class. He literally taught me to read and write properly himself. He turned me into a monitor. So I would go around with the school register, to come collect the registers up. I would be the milk monitor guy. You know what I mean? I'd take messages to the teachers, and then once he realized I could play football and everything, he started to teach me how to play football and how you have to pass to other people, and why you have to pass to other people, and why you have to communicate nicely, and why you have to give people encouragement. And so, like I say, when I met him in this situation, I'm at Highbury, you know what I mean, I'm doing this thing, it's all emotional stuff, and all of a sudden the teacher I thought was dead comes from behind me. Hello, Ian. Long time no see. Mr. Pigden. You're alive. I'm alive, he says. How are you doing? I can't believe it. Someone said he was dead. As you see, I'm very touchy, and I'm so glad you've done so well with yourself. And I literally started to cry, like I was like, I don't know, a 5, 6-year-old, uncontrollable crying because of how happy I was to see him. And you know, when I watched it, that is when I realised how much of an effect that man had on my life, and how important it is to have a positive male figure in your life.
So hopefully that's resonated with a few of you, and you know, hopefully you can think of a time where your students have been incredibly proud of working with you, and have got something to say about it as well. Some of us are posting about whether we have or haven't had that experience as well. Okay, I'm just hoping my system's now going to work for me. Okay, so you're back with me now. Let me just share my screen. I'm nearly there with you today. Okay. So hopefully you can see that screen again. So, power of teachers. We are incredibly powerful, and I think we need to have that, and we need to be aware of that. Research suggests that students in between their schooling, so primary to secondary, secondary to college, college to university, are incredibly pliable, are incredibly open to new ideas. So to have that positive influence as a teacher is incredibly important. And it's about those first impressions, isn't it? It's about that first impression at enrolment. It's about that first impression when the student has failed English and maths, but you're going to get them through it because school hasn't, but you can. It's about the first impressions in the classroom. And it's about, obviously with COVID, it's about thinking about how we do that online and in this environment. It's about still creating that warm environment that our students can be successful in. So, probably my final slide, I think. What happens next? Choice is yours. You can walk out of this session and go, yep, I need to have my sandwich now, and I'm going to take no notice of what she said at all. Or you can think about these things. The most important thing, I think, is to pause and reflect. We don't do that. Well, we don't do it at work. We rarely do it at work, but I think it's really important to. So get through enrolment, and before you start teaching, just spend time, if you work with a team, just to think about what's gone really well and perhaps what needs changing so that we can move things on. Yeah. Pause and reflect. How did the summer go for you at home with your kids when you're rushing around like a lunatic? You know, some of you spoke about getting a better work-life balance. Could that happen? The next thing I would say is think about the power of yet. I use the power of yet with my kids at home. I use the power of yet with students. So in a classroom, we might have a power of yet on a board or with post-it notes, and we do the power of yet online through something like Menti. It's also really good if you work with a team to get them to do the power of yet. Sometimes they don't want to share with you specific things, but in a more relaxed environment, unlike an appraisal, perhaps they will share something that they want to do that they can't do yet. The bottom left-hand picture is supposed to be the classic notice and whiteboard that we have in every staff room. When I managed teams, that normally said things like, do your register by 5 o'clock and don't do this with your students and do this with your students. Yeah. What I'd like you to do with that is once a month, wipe all of those notices off and get you and your team to post on there everything that you are proud of in that last 4-week, 6-week period, and fill that whiteboard up with positive growth mindset orientated statements. What have you managed to achieve in the face of adversity when people are working online for the first time? What have you managed to do in your new role that you didn't have prior to lockdown, etc., etc., etc. Share that because it's really important. Take photographs of it, celebrate and share your progress and your development with your team. Final thing I'd like to think about is your use of language, and behaviour with partner, with students, and with the people you work with your colleagues. Yeah, it's really, really important to do that. Think about when you speak, do you speak and put up barriers for the majority of the time? Are you always, we can't do that because that won't work because we can't work in that way because? Or are you more solutions and growth mindset orientated? Let's give it a try. Let's try it for 6 weeks. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. That kind of way of thinking. So again, if you're going to take a photo of nothing else, perhaps you want to take a photo of that screen before we lose it. What happens next? It's going to be over to you, isn't it? We've got to think about, what do you want to do? What could you change? Or are you already there? Has this session together made you realise that you do have a growth mindset orientated way of working? So I'm going to stop talking now. At the bottom there, you've got the first growth mindset book I read by Carol Dweck, and on the right hand side is the Matthew Syed book about bounce and the myth of talent. On the left there is my Twitter handle if you'd like to follow me. No stress about that at all. But if anybody's got any questions, I think it's possibly time for me to stop talking and we can have some questions.
Thanks, Kelly. I've really enjoyed listening to you. If anybody has a question, if they want to pop it into the chat, and I'll pick those up. But I'm gonna steal the floor with a question.
Right.
The Matthew Syed book,
Yeah.
Bounce, I think is terrific, and I've read it a couple of times. The one thing that I noted in his book, though, that he thought that was fundamental, and for people that don't know the story, it was where he lived was the hotbed of English table tennis. But he talked about a perfect set of circumstances coming together. They effectively had one street on which lived the 3 top best players in the country. They had a table tennis club less than 200 yards away from them that stayed open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And the England coach also was living.
PE teacher, wasn't he, or something?
Yes.
Something crazy, yes.
So in the current climate, have we lost some of those perfect conditions, and we're having to sort of work in an environment that is really becoming very challenging because that perfect set of circumstances has been taken away from us, and actually it makes our role as educators so much more important.
It does. I think potentially we've got students not going to youth clubs, not going to sports clubs, or they're only just starting up. They might not have that perfect link because they might not be able to go to X, Y, and Z to meet up with people like they were. But that's where I think as educators, we've got to step in and try and fill that gap, haven't we? From my college, my staff are saying, I think the hardest thing, Kelly, is going to be getting that buy-in online with students. How do we create that environment that's warm and welcoming, number one, that is then conducive to learning, number two? And I think that is a challenge. What I would say, and the way we've tried to resolve it is, for example, we only have 8 people in our teams at any one time, so only 8 students. So that the students feel comfortable in that environment. It's not too big for them, and they can get to know each other in that group of 8. Our students have felt that that's really worked for them. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's all new to us, isn't it? We're in this new time to make things better. What I will say is you have to go back to your students. You have to gain their feedback from them, because if you're delivering in a way, or working with them in a way that they don't like, they have to feel confident enough to be able to say that to you so that you can change again.
Yeah. Are there any further questions anybody wants to?
Oh, Jane, I like your comment. Yeah, you know what? It wasn't until I reflected on that. I used to be so harsh. I thought I was motivating my son by being quite horrible in the journey to West Ham. I wasn't. And when he walked off the pitch and he'd been let go, his face, I was devastated and cross with myself as a mum for behaving like that. Yeah, that never happened again. So if you haven't got any more questions, what I will say to you, because I'm aware people have got to grab a sandwich, go on and do other things. Can I just check, David? Are we sharing this? Are we sharing the presentation or not?
We record the session, so the session has been recorded.
Okay,
I did forget to turn it on about. I think it started about 15 minutes in.
Okay, so if Deb needs me to share the presentation, I'm more than welcome to share the presentation with you. Again, like I said, some of you walk out of this and go, no, that doesn't work for me. I don't agree with any of it. But some of you, perhaps if you take snippets of it moving forward, I think it will really either help you at home, you with your students, or you with your colleagues. But thank you for bothering to listen today. I've really enjoyed presenting to you. And if you have any questions, please pipe them through to Deb or via my Twitter, and we can chat about it a little bit more. Is that okay?